the clearer we are, the more we understand and have healed and resolved around our own history, the more present we can be with our clients or patients.
Oh, this is major. It's like the next big thing. Come catch the wave, yeah. Yeah, watch what's happening. A force of nature. Hit 'em like lightning. Be the creator of the next big thing. We're the movers and shakers. We are the dreamers, the makers. We stand on top of equators. We are the limitless. We got the future, no papers. We are the innovators. We have the focus like lasers. You know we doing it big. Oh, this is major.
Greetings and welcome to the Compromise to Alchemize podcast with me, your host, Dr. Neil Bolchandani. I'm really very excited to talk about Cherionna Menzam-Sills, who is a repeat guest on the podcast. She originally was on when it was the embryology podcast, and as I've changed and morphed to Compromise to Alchemize, we even re-aired that episode. And now I got to talk to her a second time. We talked about her book, The Prenatal Shadow, and the book prior to that, Spirit into Form, which is really about, it's a merging of embryology mixed with her pre and perinatal psychology experience. She has a PhD in that. They're really phenomenal accompanying books, but I really got so much insight out of this talk, so much wisdom. Cherionna is a wealth of wisdom. So those of you who know her, she's quite historied in many healing arts, and she covers such a range of these different arts. I'm going to explain them. So those of you who don't know Cherionna, or perhaps you do, and this is just a helpful refresher for you. So she started off, I believe, as an occupational therapist, and her story is on her website, which we're sharing those links, but she got into somatic therapy. And anyways, she's really gone through so many different kinds of journeys for herself, but also facilitating healing for others. And as well, she's mentored and taught many practitioners. And what I could say is that she shares about this on the episode. She has been a mentor and teacher in the field of biodynamic craniosacral therapy. So her husband, Franklin Sills, who's passed away relatively in the last several months, he was a pioneer in that field. And so this is how she met him, and that they have taught together. And as actually she grieved and is processing through that. There's so much that so many people have considered her and them mentors, and not just teachers, but they've been nurtured along in their journey. So it's reason I mention that is because I know that it is a really deep and purposeful thing for Cherionna to consider being interviewed on a podcast. And so I've really enjoyed our conversations and a little bit more about her. And I actually got to read some of her Substack publication as well. And so she's just got so much to share. What she shares a lot on is her, of course, certifications in so many different functions. As a registered craniosacral therapist, she's also, as I mentioned, a certified biodynamic craniosacral therapy teacher. She's a somatic therapist, movement therapist, and also something that's dear to me is the field of practice of continuum. And Emily Conrad, who created that, is as well a legend in the field of movement, somatics, embryology. So Emily Conrad is her teacher, and then She also studied with Ray Castellino, who in the pre and perinatal work is quite legendary. And he lived in Santa Barbara, and he was formed the Beba Clinic, and it still goes on. I know I had the great pleasure of getting to know Sarah Grace, who operated and ran Somatic Sanctuary, and Tara as well. So, though I didn't get to know Ray, I didn't know him when he was alive. I didn't know. Through ones like Sarah Grace and through ones like Cherionna, I've come to have some of that essence of what was so special about him. So she's also certified in body mind psychotherapy and authentic movement. And yeah, so she's been a therapist for 45 years, mm, facilitated personal growth and healing in private practice, hospital settings. So she's in the UK. She's conducted seminars and workshops across the US, Canada, the UK, and Europe. And she's taught developing therapists in graduate programs for somatic psychology and prenatal and birth psychology. Of course, she's trained many biodynamic craniosacral therapists. And she also has helped many pregnant parents and new babies transition through birth. And she has a lot to share with those who want to encounter the womb surround process, which is what Ray Castellino developed. And some others I interviewed early on in the podcast have also trained with Ray or trained with those who Ray trained. So she shares a little bit later on the episode about how she's doing the womb surround process, but she's kind of doing it over a longer period of time. Anyways, for those of you who don't know what it is, you got to listen. Also, she um, is a great resource for not just if you're seeking facilitation of healing. Clearly, at this phase of her career, she's doing so much to teach others so that they can impart and facilitate healing for others. So, whether you're a therapist or a manual therapist, a healer, or you just want to know more about what she does, tune in and then go ahead and follow her work. It's extraordinary. So, thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to seeing what you think.
This is major.
All right. Good morning. It's from me here from Santa Barbara, and I think it's good afternoon for you in the UK. But Cherionna, thanks for being with me on this conversation, and I'm really excited to talk about the Prenatal Shadow, your book, as well as just kind of your perspective on how we can live these compromised to alchemized lives.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to talk about it too.
Yeah, I was telling you I listened to a couple of interviews that you did back in, I think it was, at least they aired in the spring of 2025 on the book. So I feel really thankful to be delving into conversations on this because they were good. I really loved what I heard. It's always
Mm,
interesting when I hear different people from different perspectives interview somebody because they draw out different aspects of
mm,
the
yeah.
wisdom. But I also, love that we've had one conversation on my podcast before when it was called embryology. And even though the theme is different, and I re-aired your episode, which I was really thankful you were happy for that too. So you are the unique third time guest in that way on this podcast. So there you go.
Well,
Well,
I enjoyed our talk last time, so I'm looking
mm,
forward to more.
and you have so much wealth of wisdom, and you've the arc of your life has led you through so many places. So I feel like we can delve into things that even in light of your new book, we're going to cover things that we didn't cover then. So as it is, the main crux of this, I would love if you would describe, first of all, the prenatal shadow. We don't need to define the. Everybody out there knows the article of the and what that means. But could you just share what the word prenatal means and in the context of pre and perinatal, you know, psychology and your what you would go with that, and then would you define shadow as well?
Right. Well, first of all, the word prenatal, pre means before and natal means birth, so it's before birth. And Um, so I feel it's important to look at how all of us, before we're born, are sentient beings. We're having experiences. We're recording them. We do have memory and we have learning, we have intelligence, and our experiences before birth profoundly affect us. And so the prenatal shadow refers to how that experience in our modern Western world tends to be unconscious because um, people don't talk about it, people don't think about it, people don't know about it. And
Mhm.
so it doesn't get reflected when little ones try to talk about or express what their experience was when they're developing language. They don't get the language. They don't, people aren't likely to understand what they're trying to express. And so it becomes something, usually, that isn't real. It's like, oh, we don't talk about that. We don't think about that. It gets shoved into the unconscious shadow. And shadow is a term that was developed by or coined by Carl Jung, the psychiatrist. And he saw it as an aspect of the unconscious mind, and that it can express in various ways, like not necessarily verbally. It's not conscious. So, um, what I see is that people are expressing and communicating unconsciously, usually about their prenatal experience all the time. But you know, people don't tend to be aware of it. The people expressing it and the people it's being expressed to, you know, it's so much not in our culture. So, um, in the book, I bring that forth in within the context of other cultural shadows. So, I think me and others. I mean, I'm probably the only one talking about the prenatal shadow, but
Mhm.
there is a prenatal psychology field that has been going for about 100 years. Um, trying to bring this out, discovering
Mhm.
what's there. Um, but I think that, it's time to talk about the prenatal shadow as other shadows are coming into the light. And so, for example, um, well, actually, maybe I'll just start with the pre and perinatal. That many people don't realize that Freud, back in the 1920s, was looking at pre-verbal experience because his clients would bring it to him. So he had a lot of patients female patients who would talk about incest, very early incest. And um, then he had a student, Otto Rank, who wrote a book called The Trauma of Birth, which I think came out in 1924, something like that. Um, Came out in German. They were in Vienna. And Rank thought that was the greatest thing ever, and
Mhm.
really appreciated his student. However, within the context of Victorian Vienna, um, it was not acceptable to have the idea that women or female children could be incested. It's like you didn't talk about that. That didn't exist, right? It was in shadow. So so Freud then changed his theory to say that that was fantasy. Once he did that, he couldn't very well say that prenatal and birth experience was real if what
Mhm.
happened, right, so not long after birth was fantasy. So that put the whole field to sleep for a while.
Mhm.
Okay?
Mm.
So prenatal experience and birth experience went into shadow as if it didn't exist, but it continues to exist. Right? So what I've seen is that over the last, I don't know, maybe 30 years, I've actually witnessed the whole um, field of um, looking at trauma and incest and sexual abuse coming out of shadow, so people are starting, you know, back, when in the 90s, it's like nobody talked about that, and when women were uh, accessing memories of that, it was considered, this was a whole society called memory syndrome society that foundation that came up to counter that, to protect the abusers, basically. And people who are now big in the field of trauma, like Bessel van der Kolk, were considered, totally flaky and, quacks. Um, but it's come into the field of, psychology now, where it's like, yeah, the body's important. We can have memories that aren't conscious, they're in the body. Um, and that's common with trauma. And yeah, sexual abuse happens. So that's come out of shadow, right? And I think the last few years also, there's a lot coming out of shadow about um, unconscious racism and colonialism and all of that is
Yeah.
coming out.
Yeah.
So I think, in general, there's a kind of awakening. And so shining light on the prenatal shadow, I think, is part of that. It's time.
Yeah. Well, thanks for connecting that. I think it is so relevant to the emergence of people feeling well. I could theorize why it's happening now. I don't know, but I know you're right, and I know that it's so important. And I
Mm,
think even when I thought about, or when I articulated why I have the podcast called Embryology, it was, or it's so much that some people tuning in are in the craniosacral, whether it's a pleasure or biodynamic. They've either practice it or have gone to someone, or some have had the good fortune to come across some of the other educators in pre and perinatal psychology. And but I think um the kind of when, and then some have gone down the rabbit hole of delving into shadow, but I think there's this funnel back, or this path back, is to going back to the beginning, the the very beginning of it all within oneself. Because if you if you're looking for the way forward, how what better way than to not intentionally create this way of delving back in intellectually, as I want to get more into. It's more of when you hold space for, or when you, as you've witnessed through your work so many times, when people are allowed to express themselves fully, they can unearth things that were affecting them before they even came into this world.
mm,
So, what a pivotal time to have this discussion, or to have people learn more resource on this, as it's
mm,
just weighty, severe topics. But at the same time, it's like when somebody's sharing about that, I'm so thankful that people can feel safe enough to go into that and to
mm,
unearth what might be really difficult and painful to talk about, because there's a pathway for externalizing for hope and healing. So tell me, yeah, as you kind of explained that, it was almost like this dual discussion. You were just, I mean, I was feeling the topic and the work itself has been in shadow, and now that the work is coming forward to help more people, and then that way people can be helped more with this prenatal shadow that they might have experienced. Can you define maybe some more on what that shadow is within someone, and what you've, perhaps what people can experience if they're delving into this?
mm. Well, there's so many ways that can express, or try to not express,
Mm,
the case may be. Um, so something that I realize there's something I didn't say that is nagging me. So I'd like to
okay,
bring a picture
please do.
onto, because I really wanted to look at this in the book in context.
Mm,
And context is about wholeness and connectedness, the feminine, birth
yes.
is feminine, happens in a female body. It's a feminine process. And, what's happened in our modern Western culture is the masculine has really come in strongly, and it
Hmm.
tends to be divisive and isolative. Um, um, uh, what's the word? Logical. Um, where prenates aren't like that. you know, they don't even have a cortex yet. It's like you know
Yeah.
they're feeling beings. They're whole beings. They experience things in the whole, right? So when prenatal history is expressing, it tends to include the body. First of all, I'll say that little ones don't have the ability to differentiate between that was then and this is now, or that's mom's and this is.
Hmm.
They just experience it directly in their body. Okay, so when prenatal memories comes up as implicit memory, which is in the body, in the emotions, in behavior, and it feels like it's happening now. And a lot of prenatal experience is about survival. So things can feel dangerous. So, for example, if one of the experiences that I see a lot coming up relates to the time of what we call discovery, the term from William Emerson, one of the pioneers in the field. And discovery is the time when, well, he defined it as when the pregnancy is confirmed, like by a test, which can happen much earlier these days, but it tends to happen around the time that the heart develops and starts beating. It's a miraculous event. Okay. And so, first of all, um, little ones need to experience celebration and welcome in order for them to feel safe intelligently. They're not necessarily safe if they're not welcomed, right? Because they're entirely dependent on their parents and especially their mother accepting them and protecting them, excuse me, and nourishing them. Right? So if there's any ambivalence there or outright rejection, that's extremely dangerous, terrifying for the little one. So they tend to protect. Even on a cellular level, when there's danger, a cell that perceives danger, like a toxin put into their culture, cells will withdraw. Right? You don't need a nervous system to do that. You don't even need much of a body to do that. So it's an intelligent response for a little one to withdraw and protect. And discovery happens at the time when we have folded, our heart starts developing up here. And the beginning of the fourth week, we fold. So the nervous system starting to grow over. The heart comes and meets the heart center and ignition, the heart starts to beat. And that tends to be right around the time of discovery. If there's like celebration and well, like, oh, we're having our baby, it's happening, then the what I call the original embryological potential can fully express. And it's like the baby can really embrace being alive and um, have be the open-hearted being that we naturally are. If they're threatened by being rejected or not fully accepted, they're protecting that, and people often have this kind of protective stance. I used to be like that. I didn't have a neck until I did body work. It's 2 inches short. Um, and there may be other reasons people are like that, but um, I've encountered so many people where that started at discovery. They're still protecting themselves, and or they might be like this, trying to um, compensate for that. And tissues are really hard, and my dear mentor Emily Conrad used to say, she'd point out, like, usually it was a guy in the class and continuum, you know, like this, and she'd have them lie down and she'd look at, how hard this was. And she'd say, you can have a heart attack if you don't soften that.
Hmm.
Right? And it's like heart protecting. Mm. But I've also seen, because I've done a lot of supervision with practitioners of various kinds. And, in the beginning, especially, they need to put themselves out, right? They need to be discovered. And often there's a lot of difficulties. Like, I know I can't, I know I need to do a website or a business card or, what's today? It's probably Instagram, whatever it is.
Yeah.
um, and I just can't get myself to do it. Or I've designed
Mhm.
it, can't put it out.
Mm,
And we look at it and we discover that there were issues at discovery.
mm.
And, once the person is able to come to a place of experiencing welcome, then they're able to put themselves out. Quite powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very.
I I also look at, when people are like this, that's a shame posture,
Mm,
right? People are in shame. They tend to be like this also. And I'm not saying it always comes from discovery,
right.
but doesn't it make sense if somebody feels rejected? They experience shame. Like there must be something wrong with me that I'm not being welcomed. Right. So they take that on. That can become a template. What happens in the womb can become a template for how our personality forms and how we meet life and relationships later, all through life.
And yeah, this very interesting. And I think something you said this, or I know from studying your work, which is Spirit into Form, one of my favorite books.
Mm,
Carry it with me everywhere. A lot of places, especially if I'm teaching anybody about the pharyngeal arches and how they form, because that's my niche of talking about the floor of the mouth. Is but I love the artistry of your book, but the way you talk about just gestation and formation. But and you touched on this, but just to illuminate the part of like when in gestation, when one is forming, can you go into a little bit more of how it isn't necessarily their own thoughts that are what you're saying is there's no separation or no differentiation when they're forming in utero, they might in essence be receiving the thoughts that come through the mom, through the or the periphery, right? The close environment around. Is there um I both want to share this to say how when somebody might say like, but the baby's not thinking any thoughts, like they're not consciously thinking any thoughts. I'm not saying they aren't, but I mean, it's not just this one being; it's this forming dyad, and then it's this. And so also I say this not to put pressure on the woman who's birthing this baby that it's not all their responsibility to handle every thought that they have because they're, you know, but also it's the close environment around them. Anyways, not a well-formed question here, but could you to delve into to discussing this
talk about that.
part? Yeah.
Um, well, first of all, I feel to say that what we call the original blueprint, how we're designed to be,
Hmm.
includes layers of support.
Yeah.
So often when I find when I've talked about I learned this early on, talking about pre and perinatal influences, which often come down to the mother, you know, people think that I'm blaming the mother. And it's never occurred to me to do that.
Hmm.
If we have to blame, and I don't see the point really in blaming, but
Right.
uh, the blame goes to the culture.
Mm.
And it's an kind of masculine isolative culture.
Yeah.
In indigenous cultures, generally, there'd be layers of support. There'd
Hmm.
be, the partner, the uh, the parents, the ancestors, the village, the extended family, plus traditions that are all supportive. Okay? In our modern Western world, we don't have much of any of that. Actually, I heard somebody point out recently um, that in our modern world, actually, this was Jack Cornfield, who he is,
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
teacher. I've been listening to some talks from him that I think were from the 80s. So this is a while ago.
Yeah.
Still true, probably even more true now. He was saying, we don't even have nuclear families anymore. We have like half
Mm,
nuclear, we're like so many split families
yeah.
where the child has one parent or they go back and forth between parents, but they don't have a family. So, um, a lot of women are giving birth um, without a partner also, or without a supportive partner, and certainly without a supportive infrastructure. Right? So that's not their fault, you know. Um, I used to say if I'm going to blame anyone, it would be the doctor. But, doctors also don't have support. They don't have proper education for the most part, I understand, and I've heard this from medical doctors, that they are trained to look for what goes wrong. They're trained in problematic birth. Most of them have never seen a normal birth, right? So they don't even really know that it can exist. So how can they support it? Know, they're not supported to
Mm,
do what's.
mhm.
A lot of midwives know what to do. They understand that. But even I was quite shocked when from Canada, I lived in the States, and now I live in the UK. When I first came here, and I was working with newborn babies and their families, and the mothers would tell me these horror stories about what they experienced with their midwife, um, either before going to the hospital or in the hospital. And, I've come to understand that it's our National Health Service, which the midwives work within, is just so grossly unsupported and underfunded that the midwives are really overworked and they can't do their work. Midwife means being with women.
Mhm.
They can't do it. They've got too many clients and too little time and they're exhausted and etc. So layers of support. Okay. So it's nobody's fault, first of all. Right? And that time in life before birth has a profound influence on our development. So, yeah, babies, as far as I know, aren't having thoughts the way we do, but they certainly have impressions, even at a cellular level. Cells have memory, cells learn, cells have intelligence. If you think about, I might have talked about this last time. Um, you think about the immune system, it's been so big and in the news the last several years. The immune system would not exist without cellular memory. Right? Immune cells, their job is to be alert and recognize when a foreigner, an intruder comes along and remember its shape or something about it so that it can create a receptor site for it. So if it comes along again, it can do something protective, right? That is intelligence, memory, and learning and awareness. Okay? It's not like the intellectual kind, right?
Yeah.
But very simple. So babies start out as a unicellular organism, the zygote after the sperm and the egg come together. Even the sperm and the egg are having experience. Right? They've been influenced by their time in the parent. And in the case of the egg, they were also inside the grandmother, right? Because the egg is, um, all the egg cells are present within the mother when she is a 5-month-old fetus inside her mother. Okay. So, egg and sperm have had influences also, and they're carrying cellular memory of that. Okay. And we also know these days more about how ancestral memory comes down through um, turning on and off genes, right? Um, so there are other kinds of memory besides thinking about something, right?
Mhm.
Um, but sperm and egg are relational, you know, they interact with each other, they communicate to each other through various chemicals and energetic. signals and decide somehow to come together. And then they form, we say, along with a third something, like the being that's coming in.
Mm.
Um, I don't know if that's as scientific, but certainly experiential.
Yeah.
Certainly seems to be. Um, so, then we have a unicellular organism that is like an intelligent cell, responding to its environment. Okay? It's already within the environment of the mother. So if the mother is stressed, which is it's difficult for a mother to not be stressed in our modern, very overstimulating world, then the little one developing in the womb is exposed to the stress hormones. And we know that cortisol affects a lot of things in development. Right? And that baby is preparing to live in their mother's world. Right? So they're very intelligently developing in relationship to what's coming in, like the stress hormones. It's like, oh, they're not thinking this, but on a somatic level, it's like, oh, it's going to be dangerous out there. I better be ready. So we know that when mothers have um, been exposed to extreme or chronic stress, babies are born with altered levels of cortisol. Like they're ready to meet stress. They're expecting it. Mm. So that can also affect the psyche. Okay. Um, Something I've been looking at with curiosity lately is how we, so if a baby is exposed to a lot of stress, or the mother has some traumatic experience, or maybe there's some ancestral trauma or something, or there's a war going on, or, you
Hmm.
know, a political situation and everybody's worried, which a lot of people in your country can relate to right now. Um,
Hmm.
the baby's being exposed to the
Hmm.
context and preparing to live in that world. And it's a world of fear, there's so much fear going on. So I would expect a lot of babies being born now or in the next while to um, have a tendency towards being anxious, fearful, um, hyperactive, maybe. Or we know that those kinds of conditions can result in learning problems and behavioral problems and all that because it affects the development of the nervous system. What I'm really curious about these days is how that starts on a cellular level, before the nervous system is even developed.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, the cells respond, and that's like a hypoarousal kind of response, like a shutting down. That's all a cell can do. Little ones in the womb can't fight or flight or flee, you know,
Hmm.
um, they shut down. So that can establish a template again for shutting down in life when things get difficult, tending to dissociate. And there's so much of that in our world. We live in a very dissociative world, actually. I could go on and on. I'll give
Yeah.
you a chance to say something.
Well, yeah, very poignant. And it just brings me to so many, people holding space with moms and families and precious moments that were beautiful. But yeah, in then thinking about those stressful times that these families go through. And of course, I have three little ones, 5, 7, and 9. And
Mm,
it's relatively recent. So I can resonate with what you're saying. I know you were talking about the prenatal shadow, and just to jump to the perinatal for a moment, I was with this family, in January a year ago, there were the fires here in LA.
yeah.
And I hadn't we didn't live here, but I was visiting to see patients before we moved. And I was in Santa Barbara because I had been in LA to see patients, came to Santa Barbara for a few days, heading back. I was planning to go back to um, LA to work out of this office in Altadena. Well, I was going to stay at my friend's place in Topanga Canyon, which is right there and also really affected by those fires. And my buddy messaged me, my friend, he said, "Hey, just to let you know," he basically explained if I wanted to come stay with them, it was gonna like, I had to show my license and tell them that I was staying with the family there because there was this suspected power outage because there were winds. That's all they knew at that point. "It's gonna get windy. Be careful because this could be an environment for fires to spread." So, anyways, I decided to hang back in Santa Barbara, and I was like, "You know what? I'm gonna leave really super early the next morning." Well, I started to see the everything, and it was the fires, and it ravaged a lot of families, and it's so heartbreaking to think about that. But you know, then I moved here, and then it was months later, and I was journeying with this mom and her baby who had a tongue tie and was dealing with a lot of feeding issues. And there's a much more to this story, but the one moment I'll remember is when the floor of the mouth was really tense and gag reflex was really hypersensitive, and we had just had a lot of result with that in a prior session. So I said, "Huh, let me sense into what's going on." And I just tend to go into that place of feeling, sensing, and as you know very well with your work and what you've done in holding space for families, um, and all of a sudden, I started to hear this phrase, and I asked the mom if I could ask her this question, and I said, I'm just hearing that your little baby is not aware that the fire is not here right now.
Mhm.
And so little baby's like 3 months old at this point, so but, you know, he was a tiny newborn at the time of the fires, and this family lived right there. And so the mom was looking into the distance, seeing the glow and wondering, will they need to evacuate? And thankfully this family didn't. There's a lot who did. There's a lot of families who lost their homes.
Yeah.
But in that moment I thought, oh, this little one. So I asked her, was any of this relevant? I didn't know exactly where they lived. So I asked her this question. I said, I think he thinks that not only that fire is still there, he's not aware that you're necessarily out of danger. And so she said, I was really worried at that time how that might influence him, but we did okay. And I said, I know in this moment, I just think that it's hypersensitive gag reflex equals a nervous system that can't settle. And so as soon as we brought it up and we just held space, moments later, the hypersensitive gag reflex dissolved majoritively. And it
Beautiful.
wasn't through me doing any body work, as you know, it wasn't through anything I did or the layers of tissues that I would have normally worked at to help this remediate. It was that conscious awareness, that validation of what had happened, and this mom saying to this baby, not even saying it out loud, "It's okay. We're out of danger."
Yeah.
So I just couldn't help but think of that story and how what influences and what affects us, especially these tiny forming ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And I've worked with that kind of thing a lot, you
Mhm.
know, with newborns and either me saying or mom saying, somebody saying, or it doesn't even have to be out loud for a while. But
Mhm.
yeah, it was really scary back then. And now it's okay. And mom's here
Mhm.
and we're safe. Maybe
Yeah.
they'll, oh, because that's implicit memory. When it comes up, it feels like it's happening now.
Yeah.
And you need to be told, or shown that it's different now.
I'm
That
thinking
different
of all these. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I didn't wanna.
It's that differentiation.
Yeah. Thinking too here, I just love how much support you bring, not only to these little forming ones before they're born, because if you're there with, the mom, but you support, moms and families, and I know you support many practitioners. I could say so many have been mentored by you, taught by you, and of course I have felt mentored by you from afar, not having met you, but I've received the wisdom coming through your work and your talks. And so you've also, supported many practitioners in their own, you know, journey but then also in how they facilitate support for others. There's
Mm,
a lot of there, a lot there, and I think of this tender soul I know in Guadalajara. He's Dr. Eric Galindo. He's a pediatrician, and he's one of the most thoughtful beings. He's holistic, knows all about airway, feeding, supporting moms, and primitive reflexes. But anyways, he he's a good example of there's many out there who get so enlivened when they hear ones like you talk because they're
mm,
so eager to support
mm,
their families more. So to those people out there, what do you say? Um, you've supported many, you've taught many, and there's others who I know will seek you out. Um, oh boy, do I have a question here? I just love that you're able to bring such support in a time
mm,
that's much needed, and those providers, practitioners are seeing this, and some of them have no idea how to where to go and what tools. And so I want to direct people towards you and your books and your resources and any other words of wisdom to share with those in how they might carry themselves as they're journeying with others.
mm. Yeah. Well, thank you for saying all that. I think what I want to say, first of all, to those practitioners is thank you,
Mm,
because the world needs people like that, doing supportive work. And uh, I teach a training. I'm actually on a pause with the training right now, kind of revamping it. It'll come out in a little different form, but I teach a training that's for practitioners um, on really how to recognize and meet pre and perinatal issues when they come up in their work. And a lot of the work we do is around doing their own work.
mhm,
Like the clearer we are, the more we understand and have healed and resolved around our own history, the more present we can be with our clients or patients or students, whatever they are. Um, and, I've seen so often people start to do pre and perinatal work and they start projecting their own history onto
mm,
everybody. Like, a really common issue with pre and perinatal history is to have lost a twin in the womb. It comes up, every workshop I do, every
yeah.
class, it's always there. Um, and so I've gotten to see a lot of people, myself included, doing healing work in relation to having lost a twin in the womb. And often when people are in the earlier stages of that, suddenly all of their clients have lost a twin in the womb. And it's possible. It's like we do tend to attract to us people who have similar experiences or resonate.
Mhm,
But I do not support people in assuming that other people have had the same experience they have, or
mhm,
even assuming that they have prenatal issues. I think most people do, but I don't find it helpful to tell somebody what's going on with them. What I find helpful, most helpful, is to be in compassionate, mindful presence in the body with the person and to listen from a non-judgmental place, informed by what we know as practitioners. Okay, which doesn't mean I'm telling them how it is. Um, I might do some education and offer information. It's like, oh, this thing you're talking about, it's like, um, that's a common thing with people who have this history. Does
mhm,
that? But I don't immediately throw that out to the person. Well, I might because people come to me for pre and perinatal work, like they know they
mm,
have that, right?
yeah.
But in general, I wouldn't recommend that. It's more about just listening and receiving. And the most healing thing for pre and perinatal issues is to get what we didn't get back then. I think that's true with any kind of
Mhm,
child traumas, whatever. Um, and what most people didn't get enough of in the womb is welcome. Welcome here.
mhm,
Really sincere welcome and really sincere receiving It's like, oh, this is what you're bringing here. So delighted you can bring this here. Really welcoming them. And also co-regulation. So babies aren't able, little ones aren't able to regulate their own nervous system. Right? They need, y- um, babies need their mother usually, their caregiver, to regulate for them. So a lot of the work that I do with mothers and babies, if I'm doing cranial work, I put my hand on the mother first and help her system settle. Usually everything resolves in the baby once the mother's settled. It's amazing.
Mhm.
Or a lot settles. Um, but the baby will settle when the mother
Yeah.
settles. I need it with pets too. It's amazing how, um, the mother, uh, when she's able to settle, it has a profound influence. So, as a therapist, as a practitioner, I serve that role for my client. I need to be in a settled place.
Hmm.
And if I'm going to be present, I need to be in a settled place. If I'm busy going, well, what's going on? And let's get to the, I've got to figure this out. We've got to fix this. It's like I miss what's actually wanting to present. In biodynamics, we talk about the inherent treatment plan. It's so much about being, not doing. It's about listening. How does the system want to proceed based on its intelligence? And I can't pretend to know what anybody else needs. I can't even pretend to know what happened for somebody else, even if I know a lot about prenatal and birth history, possibilities of history. You know, I trust that that person and their body, their system, knows what what happened and will reveal it to them as they're ready to receive it. My little ones are very easily overwhelmed, and I don't want to be overwhelming them all over again. So, offering, the layers of support. Practitioner is a layer of support. Right? If you're working with a mother and baby, practitioner is a layer of support for the mother, who's a layer of support for the baby, right? And I know you have some biodynamic practitioners here. We work with fields within fields within fields of support,
Hmm.
energetic fields. They're like layers of support. If we orient to that, we can slow down, settle, and orient to that, and the ground of stillness from which we all arise. Feel that
Hmm.
here right now. That's an instant resource. That's a support. So that's more how I approach it, and what I recommend for practitioners
Yeah.
is less doing, more being, more listening.
There is definitely a blanket of expansion happening as you shared, and I presume others are also kind of feeling the meaning of what you said, but also there's this the significance of it, and it might be landing in people's hearts, or bringing up some really significant things as you share. So whether it be the practitioners or the people who are listening and or watching, what in that liminal space when kind of such revelations hit us, what do you find is good? How do people unfold within this potential in the moment? Do you find when you're facilitating sessions for people, um, that it just does what it does? Do you find some do well when they go journal, when they do some kind of a way of expressing to like externalize what they're experiencing? What do you feel in your work that those have shared with you are is most helpful? And I'm saying obviously in this case it's not a baby who's telling you this, or they could, although I don't think they're journaling. They might be more doing audio recordings, in utero. Uh, oh, what do you find is really helpful for people to further understand what's happening with them?
Right. Well, I encourage people to do what I call creative integration. In my training in each seminar, we have some time for creative integration, which can include journaling, um, artwork,
Yeah.
dance, movement,
Hmm.
um, music, singing, whatever it is that is helpful for them in integrating. Um, and that can also give us information, that as I mentioned that Jung, Carl Jung saw the shadow expressing in different ways. And some of that is through things like art and movement, dance. Um, so, we can get information that way too. That's a way to invite those uh, more right brain, less conscious,
Hmm.
level aspects of us to express. That can be
Yeah.
really helpful. So I include that a lot when I'm teaching.
Hmm.
Yeah, I often take pauses to journal. I to encourage people to journal.
Yeah. Well, some might be doing that right now, or if some need prompts. The reason I mention that is because what came ushered in was this beautiful stillness and sacred kind of moment where when you were sharing about, it's a few minutes back before I started talking, when you were sharing that, this bubble came. And so I feel if some want to even go back, you're listening to this and you can rewind and you can take out your journal or whatever it is, that all those things that Shariona offered, and I love those practices. And sometimes I will, if I'm not aware of what to do, and I just feel like my voice needs to get out, I'll just start talking, and then I'll just slip into song or whatever it is. Go back and take a moment, pause where Shariona was talking, and then I asked her this question because there's a special moment. There's always special moments, but I felt there was really one there, and I really appreciate you, Shariona, and those moments are golden, and I know that they're what you instruct others in and support others in, and to me, those are invaluable moments because they can really help someone come in contact with what just happened or what is happening and what can unfold further.
Yeah. And, to me, it's also a reminder of the original potential. So it's not all
Mm,
about trauma and what didn't work, but there's incredible potential in us too. And part of that potential is, the little one in the womb or even at birth, they have these huge hearts.
yeah.
They're heart centered. They might seem like they're speedy in some ways, but they're actually very oriented to dynamic stillness. That place that
Mm,
we took a few minutes ago, you know, they're it's very easy for them to sense and respond to energy, for example, and they're inherently relational beings. So they're right there in that place. So yeah, stopping to journal or draw or something, in a moment like that can help us reconnect with that potential also.
mm. This could be a good time for me in this bubble of time where one might be kind of exploring this, or at least they're aware of this, and that going back to the limitless and vast potential. I know you're very much living your purpose and your mission, and your book explains a lot that hasn't been explained much in this world. So, but I want to ask you this question that I like to ask, which is, if you could explain to me what your personal legend is, I would love that. And what it means is, it could mean your dream. What is your life dream? But it also could mean your purpose, your mission. What do you put on this planet to do? And that's the part one. The part two is, some of this is meant to be instructive to others too, is how do you keep tuned into this purpose. And I like to call the legend, uh, even though it's about a story and a narrative that one has about this life they're living, it's like on a map. This key that's on the bottom right hand or the upper left hand corner where it has, an inch is 10 kilometers, and then there might be trees, symbols. So it has these symbols so you can navigate the map really well. So let's say there is this map of your life and your personal legend that you're living. How do you, what's your personal legend as in a key or a reference point? What are the practices that help you keep tuned into this mission so that you can
Mm,
keep fulfilling it?
yeah. Well, I talk a lot about my mission. I feel like, I feel very dedicated to supporting embodied presence.
Mhm,
And to me, um, that depends on um, being aware of what's been in shadow. And so I really feel like I have a strong mission. My life purpose appears to be, um, I'm 71 years old now. It's like, time for me to know what I'm here for. um, it's really about supporting awareness of
mhm,
experience and how profoundly that affects us, how important that is. And related to that, how to how to make it better, how to um, heal in relation to what we may have experienced and to really welcome in the new little ones who are coming so they don't have to suffer the way we may have suffered. So, what supports me in that, in part, is doing my work. Every time I do a talk like this, or I do a small womb surround process workshop, or I teach a class, or I write something about this, it's reinforcing that for me, right? And um, I feel like I'm working with it and thinking about it and reading about it, all that all the time. So it's very present for me. It's like my lifelong companion.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Well, it's really wonderful just to hear that support, but also and you mentioned something there that if you would be able to explain just for those, you can we're gonna have all the links and ways people can find you but the womb surround, could you explain what happens in a womb surround?
Oh, yeah. I'm actually right in the middle of one because I've
Mm,
um, recently shifted the way I do them. Rather than doing a few days, long days together, I've
okay.
been spreading them out. So we have half days over a few weeks.
Oh, okay.
We just had Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That we'll do next weekend.
Okay.
A beautiful way to integrate this work,
Mhm,
to address it gently. So basically, what it is, I work with small groups, usually 3 or 4 people, participants, and there's me and usually an assistant. And during the time of the workshop, each participant has a turn in which um, the entire group supports them in whatever their intention is.
mm,
And it doesn't have to be a specifically pre and perinatal intention. Some people want to know more about a particular time in the womb, or they want to heal in relation to something they know happened at their birth, um, or to learn more about that. But some people have other kinds of intentions. It's like, I feel really blocked in my life and I'm not meeting my full potential. So then they want to look at that in this context. Um, so it, the form of the work was developed by Ray Castellino, one of my dear mentors.
mhm,
And who lived in Santa Barbara, where you are.
Yeah.
Um, and something I really appreciate about his work is that it works with a set of principles that are designed to support and maintain safety and present time awareness. And so we go over the principles um, as part of establishing our field at the beginning of the workshop when we work with them. Um, so it's very different from the old style of doing trauma work or pre and perinatal work where you just dive into it. And, um, you know, I know when I used to do that, it would take me weeks or months to integrate if I ever did.
Yeah.
'Cause it could be quite overwhelming. But this is really gentle and slow, the kind of pacing that little ones need, and um, a lot of reflection from others, um, and just learning to be present with the material. So it's just really beautiful work. Yeah, I love whoops roots.
Mm. Well, that's how special that you're in the midst of one. And yeah, very interesting to hear about your um the way you're doing them, and yeah, intrigued that might be allowing for there's probably a better word for this, but more integration or more of that permeation into their beings of what's being experienced.
Yeah, and I do them online,
Yeah.
so
Okay. Good to know. That's great.
uh, it starts. I'm starting at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, my time. We go
Hmm.
for 3 4 hours. Um, which makes it much easier for people in the States also. Not difficult if you're on the West Coast because that's 5 a.m. Although I have
Yeah.
somebody right who's West Coast. Um, but if you're on the East Coast, 8 a.m. isn't too early. So yeah, I'm getting more Americans now too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is good to know. Okay. I'll keep that in mind. And I mean, I first came across the work of William Emerson and Ray Castellano through the APA, through APA, when I was doing the pre and perinatal program. But then there it was dove into clinical work to where I let that kind of overshadow instead of delving more into that. And then years later, I found myself living here in Santa Barbara and feeling like, wow, well, I wasn't here to meet Ray when he was here, but I
Mhm.
feel like through talking with you, as well as talking to Sarah Grace, who on the podcast, but also when I moved here, she was still here before she moved back to Kauai. And so getting to spend time with her is really special because she's another one who's been, had that dear relationship with Ray. In all of this, I say, um, I feel very special that I've been able to spend this time with you and learn from you. And also, just thinking the opportunity for others to tune in via virtually with you first round is a really wonderful thing. So I'll make sure, yeah, I'll be sharing some links on how people can find you. But I know we're coming to our time here, so I want to make sure I leave a little time for you to share any other thoughts you have, and then of course how people can find you as well.
Right. Um, well, I just want to mention. I mean, you're right there. Right. You have the Beba Clinic right there in Ojai, very close
Yes.
to you. Yeah. Um, so yeah, mainly I have feelings of appreciation, for what you're doing and how you're
Mm.
putting out this word, um, and inviting people like me to speak. And yeah, I think I have hope for our world. There are more. I think I perceive there are more and more of us that are willing and able to. I want to say look beyond the shadow. But what I'm hearing in my head is look under the shadow. It's like if you could lift up,
Mhm.
look under it. What's there?
Yeah.
I haven't actually had that image before. That's
Hmm.
interesting.
Yeah.
Um, I'll put that into the field. And yeah, the best way to find me is my website, which is birthingyourlife.org. And there's information about the womb surrounds there, as well as, I do other teaching and talks and things. I'm very excited. I'm starting to work in person again. Um,
Mhm.
6 years, if not.
Wow.
I also teach continuum,
Yeah.
uh, mindful, fluid movement work that Emily Conrad developed. And my colleague here in the UK and I used to run retreats, and we've just set one up for September, which I'm really excited about at Karuna, which is the institute that my my dear late husband Franklin Sills and his ex-wife um, established. Is not far from where I live.
Okay. Wow.
Beautiful. So I'm really excited to be coming back into the world.
Wow. Yeah. Well, what a great thing for the world, and what a powerfully beautiful place for people to be able to come and, participate. So this is good. This is very
I
good.
should and actually Maura Franklin's ex, who runs it now, who we've become good friends.
Hmm.
She really wants me to teach a pre and perinatal seminar there.
Mm.
Um, since that's what this is about.
Yes.
I think it'll probably be next year because I haven't actually planned it yet. I think all their dates are taken for this year, and I
Mm.
don't think so much, but um, it's working its way. It's marinating, so I'm quite excited about that. To
Well, I'm gonna
you know,
stay in. I'm gonna stay in touch, and I'm gonna stay tuned into your events because I'm very interested in, for myself, but of course for all those who tune in from wherever they're tuning in. So there might be some people who can hop over really quickly, easily, and find you in your events too. So I'm excited for that.
I have an email newsletter. At the bottom of each page on my website, you can
Yeah.
sign up.
Okay. Well, yes, I will encourage everybody to do that. And okay, so as much as there's so much more
Mhm.
that we could talk about, the beauty and the poignance and the potence of what we talked about, I think is so good. So
Mm,
I feel really great to have had this time with you, Cherionna, and
yeah.
you're so kind and nurturing, and also just wise, and yeah, really wonderful to be with you. And for those who just, share this with one person who, if this strikes you, it'll strike someone who needs it, or you just know that it'll help them bloom more today.
Mm,
And I would love to hear any feedback. And of course, you'll you'll know how to tune in and follow Sherionna's work as well. So thank you for listening and watching. And Sherionna, thanks so much for being with me and for
mm,
sharing.
mm. Thank
This
you.
is major.
Thank you for listening to the Compromise to Alchemize podcast. Really excited to thank Jessica from Lunalux for the music, this track called Major. I want to thank Toshi, who originally did the design work for my cover art. And then I also want to thank Alyssa from my team for podcast publishing, my whole team, including Kat, for heading up my world. And then also definitely want you all to follow me on YouTube, follow the podcast on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcast. Comment, give us a rating, and also follow me on Instagram at Dr. Neil Bulchandani so you can stay tuned to my latest. Thanks so much, and you have an amazing day.
This is major.